My daughter stole her sister's boyfriend and tried to marry him. When we refused to attend, she turned the whole family against us. Now the wedding is off, and she's begging for forgiveness. I never thought I'd be in this situation, but here I am, feeling like my world has been turned upside down. I'm Mark, 52M, and I've always believed I had a loving family. My wife Barbara, 50F, and I have two daughters, Amelia, 27F, and Sophie, 24F. We've spent our lives trying to create a good home and instill strong values in our girls. Barbara and I met in college. We were both studying business, though I was a year ahead of her. We bonded over our shared love of 80s music and our dreams of starting our own company someday. After graduation, we did just that, a small marketing firm that we built from the ground up. It was tough in the beginning, working long hours and barely making ends meet. But we were happy. When Amelia was born, we were overjoyed. She was a beautiful baby with Barbara's blue eyes and my dark hair. From the start, she was curious about everything, always reaching for new toys and trying to explore. Sophie came along 3 years later, just as we were starting to feel like we had a handle on this parenting thing. She was more reserved than Amelia, content to observe before diving in. As they grew up, Amelia and Sophie were always close. They had their share of sisterly squabbles, but nothing out of the ordinary. They shared secrets, competed occasionally, and made countless memories together. Barbara and I thought they had a solid relationship. I remember one summer when Amelia was 10 and Sophie was 7. We had rented a beach house for 2 weeks. The girls spent every day building elaborate sandcastles, collecting seashells, and chasing each other through the waves. At night, we'd sit on the porch and watch the sunset, the girls cuddled up between us, sandy and sun-kissed. Those were some of the happiest times of my life. Sophie did show some jealousy towards Amelia at times. When Amelia was accepted into a prestigious art program in high school, Sophie moped around for days. Barbara and I sat her down and explained that Amelia's achievements didn't diminish Sophie's talents. We encouraged Sophie to focus on her own strengths. This pattern repeated a few times over the years, but we always addressed it and thought we had resolved any issues. I remember one particular incident when Sophie was about 14. Amelia had just won a regional art competition, and her painting was going to be displayed at the local museum. Sophie refused to attend the award ceremony, saying she had too much homework. Barbara and I knew the real reason, so we decided to take action. We spent the next week helping Sophie prepare for her upcoming debate tournament, practicing with her every night after dinner. When she won first place, we made just as big a fuss as we had for Amelia's art award. We thought that would help balance things out. Amelia moved out for college when she was 18, and that's when we noticed a change in her. She became more outgoing and started exploring her identity. She dyed her hair purple, got a small tattoo, which she tried to hide from us for months, and started taking photography classes in addition to her business major. We were a bit surprised by some of her choices, but we wanted to support her journey of self-discovery. During her sophomore year, she met her boyfriend, Lucas, 28M. They dated for 3 years before Amelia introduced him to us. Lucas was charming and kind, and we could see how happy Amelia was with him. He was a graphic designer, and they had met in one of Amelia's photography classes where he was a teaching assistant. A year into their relationship, Amelia confided in me that she thought Lucas was the one. I was thrilled for her, but advised her not to rush into anything. They were both young, and I wanted them to be sure about their compatibility in the long term. I shared with her how Barbara and I had waited until we felt settled in our careers before getting married, and how that patience had strengthened our relationship. We met Lucas several times over the next couple of years. He fit in well with our family, always offering to help with dishes after dinner and engaging in lively debates with Barbaru about the latest business trends. Sophie was away at college during most of these visits, so she didn't get to know him as well as we did. Everything seemed perfect, until about 6 months ago when Amelia started acting distant and tense. She stopped bringing Lucas around and avoided our questions about their relationship. Last week, Sophie came home for a visit and dropped a bombshell on us. She announced that she and Lucas were engaged and getting married in 3 months. Barbara and I were shocked into silence. Sophie seemed oblivious to our reaction and kept gushing about wedding plans, talking about color schemes and flower arrangements, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. When I found my voice, I asked if Amelia knew about this. Sophie's face clouded over, and she said Amelia had known for a while and was fine with it. I didn't believe her for a second. I know my daughters, and there was no way Amelia would be okay with her sister marrying her ex-boyfriend. I called Amelia immediately. She broke down and told us the whole story. Lucas had cheated on her with Sophie 6 months ago. When Amelia found out, she was devastated and ended things with Lucas. She never told us because she was embarrassed and didn't want to cause family drama. She had no idea Sophie and Lucas were still seeing each other, let alone getting married. As Amelia spoke, memories flashed through my mind. I remembered how excited she had been when she first told us about Lucas, how her eyes lit up when she talked about their future together. I thought about all the family dinners where Lucas had sat at our table, all the holidays he had spent with us, and now, to learn that he had betrayed Amelia's trust in the worst way possible, it made my blood boil. Barbara and I were furious. We confronted Sophie, but she became defensive. She accused us of favoritism and said we should be happy for her. She claimed that what happened between her and Lucas was true love, and that Amelia was just being bitter. She even had the audacity to say that Amelia should be over it by now and should be happy for her sister. I told Sophie that what she did was unforgivable. I asked her how she could do this to her own sister, how she could betray someone who had always been there for her. I reminded her of all the times Amelia had supported her, helping her with college applications, comforting her after her first breakup, always being just a phone call away when Sophie needed her. How could she throw all of that away? Barbara was so upset she couldn't even speak. She just went upstairs and came back with Sophie's important documents, throwing them at her and telling her to leave. I had never seen my wife so angry before. Her hands were shaking and there were tears in her eyes. Sophie stormed out, saying we didn't deserve to be at her wedding anyway. She slammed the door so hard that the family photos on the wall rattled. Barbara and I were left reeling, unable to process what had just happened. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of how our family had fallen apart so quickly. We called Amelia again to check on her. She was a mess, but grateful that we knew the truth now. She apologized for not telling us sooner and said she had been trying to move past it on her own. She told us more details about what had happened, how she had caught Lucas and Sophie together at a party, how Sophie had begged her not to tell us, promising it was a one-time mistake. Amelia, always the protective older sister, had agreed to keep it quiet for Sophie's sake. She never imagined it would lead to this. I can't help but wonder where we went wrong. How did our family end up like this? Sophie's actions have torn us apart, and I don't know how we'll ever recover. I think back to all the times we tried to make sure both girls felt equally loved and valued. Was there something we missed? Some sign we should have seen? Barbara and I are standing firmly with Amelia, but the thought of cutting ties with Sophie is heartbreaking. I remember holding her as a baby, teaching her to ride a bike, helping her with her math homework. How did that little girl grow up to do something so hurtful? I never imagined I'd be in this position, choosing between my children. But Sophie's betrayal of her sister is something I can't overlook. We're not attending the wedding, and right now, I can't see a future where Sophie is part of our lives. The thought of watching her walk down the aisle to marry the man who broke Amelia's heart is unbearable. This whole situation has left me feeling lost and angry. I'm struggling to understand how Sophie could do this to her sister and how she can act so unapologetic about it. Barbara is devastated, alternating between crying and seething with anger. She keeps saying she feels like she's failed as a mother, and nothing I say seems to convince her otherwise. I'm reaching out here because I don't know what to do next. How do we move forward as a family? Is there any way to salvage our relationship with Sophie, or is this betrayal too big to overcome? And most importantly, how do we support Amelia through this nightmare? She's always been the strong one, the one who held us all together. Seeing her so broken is tearing me apart. Part of me wants to reach out to Sophie to try and understand what she's thinking, but another part of me is too angry to even consider it. And then there's Lucas. I trusted him, welcomed him into our family. The betrayal I feel from him is almost as strong as what I feel towards Sophie. As I sit here writing this, I can hear Barbara on the phone with Amelia, trying to comfort her. The sound of my daughter's muffled sobs is like a knife to my heart. How do we heal from this? How do we move forward? I've always prided myself on being able to fix things, to find solutions to problems. But this feels insurmountable. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and things have only gotten more complicated. I want to thank everyone who offered advice and support. It's been a challenging time for our family, and your words have been a source of comfort. The day after I made my post, my parents called. They live across the country, so we don't see them often, but we've always been close. My father, John, 78M, and my mother, Margaret, 75F, have always been very involved in their granddaughters' lives, even from a distance. When the girls were born, my parents set up trust funds for both of them. The money was supposed to be for their education or to help them start their adult lives. I remember when they told us about the trust funds. It was during their visit after Sophie was born. We were sitting in the backyard, watching Amelia toddle around while Sophie napped in her bassinet. My father, always the planner, explained how he wanted to ensure a solid financial foundation for his granddaughters. Barbara and I were touched by their generosity, though we insisted on saving for the girls' futures ourselves as well. My father was calling to tell me that Sophie had reached out to them about using her trust fund to pay for the wedding. He was confused because he thought Sophie was single, and wanted to know if we knew anything about this sudden engagement. I took a deep breath and told my parents everything. They were shocked and disappointed. My mother started crying, saying she couldn't believe her granddaughter would do something so cruel. I could hear the pain in her voice, and it broke my heart all over again. My father, always the more practical one, immediately said he wouldn't release the trust fund money for the wedding. Sophie must have sensed that things weren't going her way because she called my parents again the next day. She tried to guilt them into giving her the money, saying they had promised it was hers to use as she wished when she turned 21. My father, who doesn't tolerate manipulation, told her that the money was off limits and that he and my mother wouldn't be attending the wedding. This set off a chain reaction in our extended family. My sister, Janet, 55F, was the first to call. She and her husband, Tom, 57M, have always been close to the girls. They would often take Amelia and Sophie for weekends when they were younger, treating them to trips to the zoo or baking cookies together. Janet was horrified when I told her what had happened. She immediately said she wouldn't attend the wedding and would be calling Sophie to give her a piece of her mind. Next was my Aunt Carol, 68F, my mother's sister. She's always been the family peacemaker, the one who could smooth over any argument. But even she was at a loss this time. She asked if there was anything she could do to help, offering to fly out and stay with us for a while if we needed support. Over the next few days, cousins and other relatives all called, wanting to know what was going on. We told them the truth, and one by one they all decided they couldn't support Sophie's wedding. It was a small comfort to know that our family stood united in this, but it also made the whole situation feel even more real and painful. Meanwhile, Amelia has been struggling. She started seeing a counselor to help her process everything, which I'm glad about. She told us that some mutual friends had reached out to her after hearing about the engagement. They were confused and wanted to know what had happened. Amelia hadn't told many people about the cheating, so she was forced to relive the pain as she explained the situation to her friends. One of these friends, Sarah, 27F, has been particularly supportive. She and Amelia have been best friends since high school, and Sarah was always around our house when the girls were teenagers. Sarah called us to check in and offer her support. She told us how angry she was on Amelia's behalf and how she had cut off contact with Sophie as soon as she heard what happened. The hardest part for Amelia has been the memories. She and Lucas had been together for over 3 years, and they had talked about marriage. She kept asking us how Sophie could do this to her, and honestly, we didn't have an answer. Amelia told us about the plans she and Lucas had made. They had even started casually looking at houses in the area, talking about where they might want to settle down. All of those dreams had been shattered, and now she had to watch her sister living the life she had imagined for herself. Barbara has been amazing through all of this. She's been a rock for Amelia, spending hours on the phone with her and even driving up to visit her a few times. I can see the toll it's taking on Barbara, though. She's lost weight and hasn't been sleeping well. I often find her looking through old family photo albums late at night, tears in her eyes as she traces her fingers over pictures of the girls when they were young and innocent. As for me, I've been trying to keep everything together, but it's been tough. I've thrown myself into work, staying late at the office most nights. It's easier to focus on client problems than to come home and face the reality of our family situation. I know it's not a healthy coping mechanism, but right now, it's all I can manage. Last weekend, Sophie showed up at our house unannounced. She was angry and accused us of turning the family against her. She said we were ruining the happiest day of her life and that we should be ashamed of ourselves. Barbara lost her temper and told Sophie that she should be the one ashamed, betraying her sister and trying to marry a man who had cheated on Amelia. Sophie broke down then, crying and saying that she and Lucas were in love and that it wasn't fair that they had to suffer because of a mistake. I asked her if she ever considered how Amelia felt, and she just stared at me blankly. It was clear that she hadn't given any thought to her sister's feelings. We told Sophie that we couldn't support her marriage and that she needed to leave. She left in tears, and we haven't heard from her since. As she drove away, I couldn't help but remember teaching her to drive in that very driveway. How had we gone from those happy moments to this? The wedding is supposed to be in 6 weeks, and we're dreading it. Even though we're not attending, the thought of it happening is painful. Amelia is considering moving to a different city to get away from everything, and part of me thinks that might be best for her. She's always loved San Francisco, and there's a good art scene there. It breaks my heart to think of her being so far away, but I understand her need for a fresh start. I'm still struggling to understand how we got here. How did my sweet little girl turn into someone who could hurt her sister so deeply? Barbara and I have been going over every moment of their childhood, wondering if we missed something, if there were signs we should have seen. For now, we're focusing on supporting Amelia and trying to heal as a family. But the future feels uncertain, and I'm not sure if our family will ever be whole again. The thought of holidays without both our girls, of Sophie not being there for future family milestones, it's almost too painful to bear, But right now, I don't see how we can move past this betrayal. All we can do is take it one day at a time and hope that somehow, someday, we can find a way to heal. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update, and I'm still reeling from everything that's happened. The wedding was supposed to be this weekend, but it's not happening. Here's what went down. 2 weeks ago, Sophie showed up at our door again. This time, she was a mess. Mascara streaking down her face, hair disheveled, looking nothing like the confident woman who had announced her engagement. She begged us to talk to her, so we let her in. It reminded me of when she was a teenager, coming home past curfew with tear-stained cheeks after a fight with her high school boyfriend. But this was far more serious than teenage drama. Through her sobs, Sophie told us that everything had fallen apart. Lucas had called off the wedding. Apparently, the stress of the family drama and the loss of financial support from the trust fund had been too much for him. He told Sophie that he wasn't ready for marriage and all the complications that came with it. As Sophie spoke, I couldn't help but think back to all the times Lucas had sat at our dinner table, laughing and joking with us. He had seemed so sincere, so committed to Amelia. It was hard to reconcile that image with the man who had betrayed both our daughters. Sophie was devastated. She kept saying that she had given up everything for Lucas, her relationship with Amelia, her standing in the family, even her own moral integrity. And now he had abandoned her when things got tough. I felt a mix of anger towards Lucas and a twisted sense of justice that Sophie was finally facing consequences for her actions. As she talked, it became clear that Sophie had been living in a fantasy world. She had convinced herself that her relationship with Lucas was this great love story, worth any sacrifice. She thought that once they were married, everyone would see how perfect they were together and forgive them. It was a naive and selfish way of thinking that showed just how immature Sophie still was. Barbara and I listened, but we didn't offer comfort. We couldn't. The pain Sophie had caused was still too raw. When she finally ran out of tears, I asked her the question that had been burning in my mind for months. Why? Why did she do this to Amelia? Sophie's answer was both illuminating and heartbreaking. She said she had always felt like she was living in Amelia's shadow. Amelia was the artistic one, the one who always seemed to succeed effortlessly. Sophie admitted that when Lucas started showing interest in her, it felt like finally she had something that Amelia wanted. I was shocked. We had always tried to treat our girls equally, to celebrate their individual strengths. But somewhere along the line, we had failed Sophie. She had grown up feeling less than, and instead of talking to us about it, she had lashed out in the worst possible way. Don't get me wrong, I'm not excusing Sophie's actions. What she did was still terrible and caused immense pain. But understanding her motivations helped me see that this situation was more complex than I had initially thought. We told Sophie that while we appreciated her honesty, it didn't change what had happened. The trust she had broken couldn't be easily repaired. We suggested that she seek therapy to work through her feelings of inadequacy and to learn healthier ways of dealing with her emotions. Sophie left that day looking defeated but somewhat relieved to have finally told us the truth. We haven't heard from her since, but Barbara did get a text saying she was starting counseling. As for Amelia, she's doing better. The news of the canceled wedding brought her some closure. She's still planning to move, but now it feels less like running away and more like a fresh start. She's been looking at apartments in San Francisco and has even lined up a few job interviews at art galleries there. Barbara and I are left to pick up the pieces of our family. We're working on rebuilding our relationship with Amelia and hoping that someday we might be able to have some kind of relationship with Sophie again. But for now, we're taking it one day at a time, trying to learn from our mistakes and move forward. The canceled wedding has been a topic of gossip in our extended family and social circle. We've been fielding calls and messages from well-meaning relatives and friends, all wanting to know what happened. It's exhausting having to explain the situation over and over again, but we're trying to be honest without going into too much detail. Barbara and I have been talking a lot about where we go from here. We're both still hurt and angry, but we're also worried about Sophie. Despite everything, she's still our daughter, and it's hard to completely shut off those parental instincts. We're considering reaching out to her in a few weeks, maybe suggesting a family counseling session. For now, though, our focus is on Amelia. We're helping her plan her move, and Barbara is already talking about regular visits to San Francisco. It's not the future we had imagined for our family, but we're trying to make the best of it. Update 3. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some final thoughts on this difficult chapter of our lives. Amelia has moved to San Francisco and seems to be thriving. She's thrown herself into her art and has even had a small exhibition at a local gallery. She calls us regularly and sounds happier than she has in months. She started dating again, casually for now, but it's good to see her moving on. Last week, she sent us photos of her new apartment. It's a small studio, but filled with light, perfect for an artist. She's decorated it with some of her own paintings and photos from our family vacations. Seeing those familiar images in her new space was bittersweet, a reminder of happier times, but also a sign that she's carrying those memories with her as she builds her new life. Sophie has been continuing with her therapy. She reached out to us last month, asking if we could meet for coffee. It was a tense meeting, but productive. Sophie apologized again, this time more sincerely. She said her therapist had helped her understand the depth of hurt she had caused and the work she needs to do on herself. During our meeting, Sophie shared that she had run into Lucas at a grocery store. She said seeing him brought back all the pain and regret, but she was proud that she hadn't fallen apart or tried to reconnect with him. It seems like she's finally starting to understand the gravity of her actions and is taking steps to grow from this experience. We're not ready to fully welcome Sophie back into our lives, but we've agreed to take small steps. We're going to have monthly family dinners, just the four of us, to try and rebuild some trust and communication. Our first dinner is scheduled for next week, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous about it. Barbara and I have also been seeing a family therapist. We're working on understanding how we might have contributed to the dynamics that led to this situation and learning how to better support both our daughters. It's been challenging to confront our own shortcomings as parents, but I believe it's necessary for healing our family. Lucas reached out to Amelia to apologize. She didn't respond, which I think shows how far she's come in moving past this whole ordeal. She told us about the message, saying she felt nothing but pity for him now. It was a far cry from the heartbroken girl she was just a few months ago. As for Barbara and me, we're doing okay. This experience has been a harsh reminder that family relationships require constant work and open communication. We're committed to doing better moving forward. We've started having weekly date nights, something we had let slide over the years, to make sure we're staying connected and supporting each other through this difficult time. There's still a long road ahead of us, but for the first time in months, I feel hopeful about our family's future. It won't be the same as it was before, but maybe, just maybe, we can build something new and stronger from the ashes of this experience. The other day, I found an old photo of Amelia and Sophie as little girls, arm in arm and grinning at the camera. It made me tear up, thinking about how far we've come from those innocent days. But it also reminded me of the love that has always been at the core of our family. That love is still there, buried under hurt and betrayal, but not extinguished. And that's what we'll build on as we move forward. Thank you to everyone who has followed our story and offered support. Your kindness has been a bright spot in a dark time.